Welcome back to the Week 10 waiver wire video ad. We've got the most important guys to add, as well as some deep stashes that you need to know about. So let's get it going with. All right, so next up is another stash, a guy that you should probably consider putting on your roster because we know Aaron Jones got hurt in this week's game, and it'll be interesting to see what the news says moving forward about Jones. But even as a guy who is a Lions guy, I watched that entire game, painstakingly watched that entire game that nobody wanted to win, and the running game just didn't look great at times. I mean, so a guy like Kylin Hill, if there is an injury, maybe he brings a jolt to this offense. What are your thoughts on this whole situation in Kylin Hill?
Yeah, this is just a deep one. We have no idea what's going to happen, but, ankle injury for Aaron Jones. If he's going to be out, we know A.J. Dillon is probably going to be a top 16, 18 option the rest of the season if Aaron Jones would be out for an extended period of time. But we also know that Green Bay uses multiple running backs. They don't just use one guy. So Kylin Hill's probably going to get opportunities. It's not a given, but if I'm looking for a deep stash, if something would happen to A.J. Dillon, then Kylin Hill could get a ton of work. So it's kind of, a dart throw, but maybe that offense figures it out the second half of the season and Kylin Hill gets a lot of work if Aaron Jones misses extensive time and you get a nice running back for cheap off your waivers.
There you go. All right. Next up, another guy, Zack Moss from the Indianapolis Colts. Sounds weird. He got traded and then was not playing this week in week 9, but looks like, with the Jonathan Taylor up and down all season with injury, they needed somebody else to help shoulder the load. Nyheim Hines went to Buffalo, so obviously there's plenty of room for something behind Jonathan Taylor. What's your gut tell you to do with Zack Moss, and what kind of are you expecting the rest of the season for him?
Well, Zack Moss is somebody to protect against JT, right? Or if you don't have JT on your roster, if JT misses extended time, we've seen today, like the running backs for Indianapolis either hurt or ineffective. They just traded for Zack Moss, even though it looks like a throw-in on that deal with Nyheim Hines going the opposite direction. But he could get a ton of work, right? If everybody else is hurt and ineffective and JT misses time, a lot of time the remainder of the season, Zack Moss could end up being the guy. I'm not a big Zack Moss fan, but I will take opportunity. And there's a chance that Zack Moss gets a lot of that over the second half of the season for the Colts.
Definitely potential because we've seen it. Jonathan Taylor's been up and down this year. So Zack Moss is definitely an interesting name to stash. Another running back stash, Kyren Williams. As you can tell here, week 9, none of the running backs really did anything super exciting. So a guy like Williams coming back from injury, maybe he's the boost they need. Maybe he gets an opportunity. What are you thinking here with Williams?
It's just like what we said last week, right? This is no different. Henderson had a decent week by the numbers. I believe it was one big run that made up a lot of that because early in the game, the run game was literally nothing. Henderson hadn't done anything. Akers hadn't did anything. Obviously, they only carried the ball 19 times between the 3 running backs there. They need help in the running game. And next week is the week that they have to make a decision on Kyren Williams being active after, his 21-day window will close after they pulled him off of IR. So next week could be the week that he is active and gets an opportunity. And it wouldn't surprise me if he ended up getting 15 carries in a game because they just seem to not be in love with anybody that they've got. And none of them have really given you a reason to be in love with him.
Another stash here, Isaiah Spiller. This is an interesting name, a very talented running back coming out of college in a really good position. We like the backup role here because there is some potential value. What's your thoughts on Spiller?
Yeah, so, this is the week where he kind of took over the backup role. Sony Michel only had 1 attempt this week. Isaiah Spiller got up to 7. It wasn't like a big fantasy production week, but we want the guy that's going to get all the touches if something would happen to Eckler. Obviously, Eckler had a big week. If he goes down, it looks like Isaiah Spiller is going to get a ton of work, and we want the running back in that offense that gets a ton of work. So if you have a spot to stash Spiller, I think it could pay off big if something would happen to Eckler.
All right, next up, Rachaad White from the Buccaneers. This is an interesting situation going on in Tampa. I mean, the team's kind of all over the place, and people, I even saw in our Discord chat today, people going, what's going on with Leonard Fournette? Rachaad White looks like a guy they want to get involved more. How do you feel about him moving forward? And do you think he continues to eat into Fournette's work?
Yeah, well, I mean, when it comes to rushing attempts, they're like 50-50 this week, right? 9 for Lenny and 8 for Rachaad. Their running game is putrid right now, and they're going to have to figure something out. I believe Justin Fields has more rushing yards than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers do. And that's never good, right? I think the
Right.
Buccaneers were last going into this week in rushing yards, and we continue to see Fournette get less and less work rushing the ball. Rashaad's getting, he had 3 receptions this week. We could end up seeing him work into that role for Lenny. 22 targets on the season as the backup there, with Lenny getting the majority of the time, is a decent indication that if Lenny loses his job or gets hurt, that Rachaad White could just blow up. And you want to get him before Lenny gets hurt if you have a spot to stash. And another running back that is just on the verge. He's just real close to taking over a bigger role in that offense and giving fantasy owners a viable option down the stretch that they can get for nothing off the waiver wire.
All right, next up is a guy that we've been talking about. Now, obviously, we've seen, as you can see here, the ownership numbers are moving up, but we always want the Baltimore Ravens running back. And it looks like, now obviously, this is based up until last week, but it looks like Drake looks the best in this backfield. How do you feel about Drake moving forward? And do you think that we continue to see him take the majority of the valuable fantasy touches here?
Yeah, as long as Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins aren't right, then I think Drake's the guy that's going to get a majority of the work in that backfield. And he's still available in 35%, 30% on Sleeper, 35 on Yahoo, but 60% on ESPN. So if you're playing in ESPN leagues and you need running back depth, I think Drake is a huge one, because I don't know that we're going to see Gus Edwards right for the remainder of the season, especially for the remainder of the fantasy season. You need a running back. Drake could be the guy that you just plug in and start for the rest of the season as a flex option. And running backs in the Ravens offense, we've talked about it a million times, are typically very, very efficient. So even if he's not getting 16 to 18 carries, we've seen him get a bunch of receptions last week. If that continues, Drake could be a huge running back for people down the stretch. And while not available in a ton of Yahoo and Sleeper leagues, he is available in the majority of ESPN leagues. So wanted to make sure to keep this on there for the people in ESPN leagues.
Next, Jeff Wilson, newly acquired running back from the Miami Dolphins. This Dolphins running back room is all over the place, but they do love ex-49ers, that's for sure. With Mostert, with Jeff Wilson. Wilson looked good this week. Was pretty efficient with his opportunities and even gave you a touchdown. What do you expect out of this backfield moving forward? Is it the Jeff Wilson show, or are we going to see kind of a split up situation?
I didn't think that we were going to see Wilson take this much work away from Mostert in the first week. So that's not very good for Mostert owners the remainder of the season. Obviously, this isn't a foreign system for Jeff Wilson, right? He comes straight from the system and gets plugged right into that system, with McDaniel being from the 49ers organization and whatnot. So he knows more than the typical running back that switches teams. So it was easier to get him involved right off the bat. Absolutely. But it seems like he is already their preferred option at running back. That offense is just so good. They are very, very good when Tua is under center. So I think Jeff Wilson has a lot of opportunity the rest of the year in a really good offense that could end up being a big fantasy. He's already been a big fantasy option for people for the season since Elijah Mitchell went down. He's already been very good from a fantasy perspective, and he's still available in half a league. So what the hell's going on?
Absolutely. Thank you for checking us out. Like, subscribe, hit the notification icon. Go to Discord if you want to talk with us more, and we'll talk to you later.